It's 7 p.m. in Brussels, 6 p.m. in London, 1 p.m. in New York, 1 a.m. in Hong Kong, 3 a.m. in Sydney, 10 a.m. in San Francisco, and 10:30 at night in Mumbai. Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Patrick L. Young. The IPO-VID live stream, Series 8, Episode 5. That's number 47, starts here. We've had a frantic week in Exchange Invest, as always, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, it was very interesting to see that Joe Brezhnev, the President of the United States of America, was in offering some of the strategic oil supply, a whole 2.5 days worth, which oddly enough didn't do a great deal to the supply of oil whatsoever, and actually pushed the price of Brent crude up. Congratulations on the oil front. Of course, you'll remember last year I wrote about an island of excellence in the world of Abu Dhabi and the Abu Dhabi global markets, namely the Murban crude futures. 1 million contracts have now traded. That's on the IFAD, ICE Futures Abu Dhabi, the exchange that was built in 504 days during lockdown, hashtag despite COVID. And here we are less than 2 years from the point at which it was originally mentioned as being a project. We're at 1 billion barrels of crude oil. Not quite filling 1 billion barrels, but we've got something very, very interesting afoot as well. I mentioned Joe Brezhnev. He was giving away some of the American strategic oil supply with unfortunate effects. Well, breakfasts around the world, they may yet be saved for those who want something sweet and aren't taking Nutella. The monopoly that controls 73%, no less, of everybody's favorite glutinous Canadian maple syrup. They're going to release 22 million litres, no less, of maple syrup onto the market in an effort to try and stop breakfast price inflation. All this and more, much, much more about the world of exchanges has been covered in greater detail in Exchange Invest Daily, the unique newsletter of the Bourse business, published by myself, Patrick L. Young. Send us an email or hit us up on social media if you'd like to be included on the subscriber list. We'll be happy to give you a free 30-day trial. Now that brings us neatly to the epicenter of the parish of bourses. Our guest today is Rosa Armesto. Today's topic, capital markets from Brussels with love. Rosa Armesto is the Deputy Director General of the Federation of European Securities Exchanges, FESE. They're responsible for coordinating all the regulatory policy campaigns and strengthening the positioning of the European bourse business on the key issues and priorities for exchanges in Europe. Having predominantly worked for FESE during her career, there were 4 years in exile where Rosa was a member of the management team and head of public affairs and communications of Insurance Europe. Prior to working in Brussels since 2007, Rosa has been in Luxembourg with Eurostat, that's the statistical office of the European Commission. And as a Spanish national, she holds a master's degree in economics from the University of Zaragoza and has also got qualifications from the University of Groningen in Holland. She's got a bachelor's degree in statistics. Now, there's a mean degree of calculation for you, from the University of Zaragoza as well. And more excitingly, I think, and certainly much more harmonically, she's got a degree in piano from the official music college in Teruel in Spain. She speaks English, French, and Spanish. This evening, we're delighted to say we're going to be dealing with capital markets from Brussels with love entirely in English. Rosa, good evening. So, where in the world are you this evening?
Good evening, Patrick, and good evening, everyone. I am at home in Brussels right now.
Excellent. So you're at home in Brussels. How are things there at the moment? I mean, are you locked down? Are you able to go to the office?
I will say we are half-half, so we are obliged to work from home except 1 day per week, but it's very much recommended to stay, I would say, 100% at this moment. So, I mean, who will have thought that so many months afterwards, we will be again in this obligatory working from home, but okay, we cannot complain as far as health is good.
Well, that's the important thing, that your health is good, and I hope all the FESE team are well too. It's lovely to see you this evening. So, you know, looking at Europe, obviously, we've had a bit of excitement recently, haven't we? I mean, just less than 10 days ago, suddenly this letter got leaked, which some people thought was maybe the European Commission's letter to Santa for Christmas, but it seems to be all about the MiFIR, the MiFID review. Tell us a little bit about what's been going on there.
Indeed, so happy to do so. Has been a very busy period, and it is going to be in the future. Why? It's because the European Commission has released a big package of measures in the form of legislative proposals, that now we all need to analyze and assess, and it will be the time in which the co-legislations will put their hands to start the political discussion. So what has happened is that, as you rightly said, Patrick, about 10 days ago, there was a leak of the Capital Markets Union package that includes 4 legislative proposals, being one of them the MiFID review. So with regards to MiFID, and of course, I guess we will talk about that also later, but there was an expected review of MiFID II MiFIR, which is the current regulation that we have in capital markets. But the European Commission has done the review in 3 pieces. So they took some parts last year in June in the recovery package, what it was called the MiFID quick fix. So there were some measures there. Then they are doing, I would say, the big bulk of market structure functioning right now in the MiFIR review, included in this CMU package. And then they will do also some parts of MiFID too that relate to investor protection under the umbrella of the EU retail strategy. So this is all the kind of jargon that we need to know here in Brussels to really navigate well on when and how to act.
So, as you say, it's a jargon-rich environment working in Brussels. What was it like when you first got to Brussels? Was it a shock to the system, the way things worked?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I think it really was a smooth process. To be very honest, I didn't know much about lobbying. I didn't know much about Brussels itself, and the functioning. To be very blunt, I got from Eurostat doing an internship there. I just wanted to continue to work for European affairs. So landing here was really exciting. Why? It's because a lot of things happen in Brussels in the sense of many different cultures, many different events as well. And also when you really kind of dive into the European work, so to say, you really need to try to understand how it really functions. So I was just saying, this proposal from the Commission and what that means. Well, it means that the European Commission is the body at European level that proposes legislation, and then this needs to be agreed by the Council and the European Parliament. So imagine these 3 bodies, they all come together here, which means that these are 3 institutions with their workforce, with all the different people that you need to kind of know, meet and greet, and also all the different associations that are as well here based. And you also need to kind of get together because there are many common grounds. So I will say that it took me time in the sense that it was smooth, but definitely once you really start realizing, it's a very exciting environment.
So fascinating environment altogether. Let me just say thank you very much for all the messages we've had already this evening. I'm here with Rosa Armesto from Brussels with Love. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask about the process of FESE, the Federation of European Securities Exchanges, about the greater workings of Brussels itself in relation to any of those pieces of jargon we've heard, Capital Markets Union, MiFID, MiFIR, etc., then let us know. Write us a question in the comments. We'll be happy to answer them before the end of the show. Good evening, Simon Huckle. Great to see you again this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you also to Chris Messina. Glad to see that you're around this evening and, yes, making quips about the Biden unity government being the gift that keeps on giving. Echoing the words of Ronald Reagan's great joke, the 7 most dangerous words in the English language being, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Thank you very much. Great to see you both this evening, guys, and various others as well. Keep the comments and questions pouring in. Rosa, really interesting to look, therefore, at where we sit in Brussels at the moment. I mean, talk us through what you think is the agenda upcoming that's going to be really important for capital markets.
Well, capital markets, I must say, that have become more relevant than ever. And I think also that the COVID crisis in which we are in has really put the need and the relevance of equity. And I think that this is something that even though the Commission realized already 6 years ago, because they launched the Capital Markets Union in 2015, now it has really been confirmed that capital markets need to be used more than ever to alleviate the dependency on the banking lending. So where are we on capital markets is that, well, we have a reality in Europe, which is that we do not have as many IPOs as we would like. And also we have a bit of a complex functioning, I would say, of the 27 member states coming together and trying to have a capital markets union. So I think it is very important to look, and this is what the officials from the Commission have been looking at, what are the obstacles that are preventing companies to go public, try to see how they can alleviate, at least from legislation. So obviously then there are many other factors and components, but from the legislative point of view, what could be done to try to soften this process? And also to try to assess the unintended consequences of current legislation. Because just to give you an example, MiFID II brought the unbundling of research of companies. And for instance, this is something that has been really putting some of the companies out of the radar of some of the brokers. And it was seen that, in fact, this had to be addressed. So, for instance, this is something that got addressed in this MiFIR quick fix as part of the recovery package. So where are we is that looking at what can be done to really try to steer the capital markets in Europe and try to be competitive vis-a-vis other parts around the world. And for that, we have, as I said, a big kind of battery of measures that are put in place to really try to put this all together.
Very interesting. And thank you very much, Oliver Hoyer, for your comments. It's great to see you as well. I agree. The show this evening is lit with Rosa Armesto on board from Brussels with love. Okay, so you mentioned this problem. I mean, the dichotomy very roughly is essentially that 80% of the commercial economy of the United States of America tends to be funded by effectively commercial instruments, equity, debt, and so on, and public exchanges. The problem is in Europe, it's exactly the opposite way around. The banks are doing about 80% of it, the public markets are doing about 20%. And that's obviously a problem. And it's a problem that's been there since long before the European Economic Commission, let alone the EC or the EU. But I mean, so far, it seems to me, looking from the outside, we've had what? A capital markets union process that's been talked about or in process for the better part of a decade. Progress seems to have been painfully slow.
Indeed, progress is slow. I cannot disagree with that, but it's true that these things take time. And obviously, I mean, when we talk about legislation at European level with the different phases that it needs to pass on, it really takes time. However, what I think it is very relevant right now is what is being proposed currently, because even though it takes time, I think if the measures that are being discussed are the good ones, then okay, we can wait because we know that the end will be very good. What I think is more concerning is to see, for instance, that while we do have a bit of a struggle bringing companies into capital markets, we also see that there are quite significant levels of dark trading in Europe. So I think that all this together kind of puts the question out like, okay, what we need to do. And for instance, now with the Capital Markets Union, as I said, this MiFIR review that belongs to the Capital Markets Union package, we feel that has been, from the proposal point of view, because this is not finished, has been a bit of a missed opportunity. So I think the Capital Markets Union itself is a great initiative. It's very much needed. Yes, it takes time, but hopefully once all the different measures will be in place, normally we should expect an improvement. But what is very, very important is that the measures that are being discussed are the right ones. And for instance, when now I see, we already saw it from the leaked document, but now it has been confirmed with the adopted package, that still there is not enough ambition to tackle the transparency of the trading landscape. This is why we need to probably continue working very hard on that. Okay,
so that's great, because actually, I mean, FESE, you issued a press release last week, and I'll paraphrase it. I think exactly what you said actually was it was kind of one step forward, one step back with the latest review proposal. Perhaps you can walk us through exactly where you're seeing that and what are the issues.
Yeah, of course, I'm happy to do so. So indeed, we had a bit of a mixed feeling with this proposal, depending on the areas, of course. Why we said one step forward, one step back? Well, because we thought that some of the things were positive, but not ambitious enough. So for instance, if you look at this review, this is divided in 3 kind of blocks. One will be anything that has to do with market structure rules. Then you have the one on the consolidated tape, which has a bit become the centerpiece of this MiFID review, because the Commission really thinks that a consolidated tape in Europe will improve a lot the access to capital markets in Europe. And the third one was the competitiveness of the union. So in each of these, more or less, broadly speaking, there are good things and bad things, in the sense that we think that, yes, it's good that there is some measures to tighten a little bit the functioning of what is called systematic internalizers here in Europe, I mean, with regards to the definition of MiFID. So basically, this is what it is, internalizing flow, bilateral trading. So there have been some proposals put in place to try to tighten a little bit the pre-trade transparency and try to shift a bit towards price formation. I mean, let's not forget that price formation is something crucial in capital markets. I mean, maybe for those that are not very familiar, but price formation is when you really take into account the interest of the buyer and the seller, and you put them together, you factor in, and then you get the price of the security. And this is very important, not only for the company, so that you have the price of the share at a certain moment in time, but also the price that investors are all ready to pay. And then from that price, which gets disseminated by exchanges, then all the rest of the market participants reference these prices. So for instance, internalization reference that price and then conducts their bilateral trading. So one of the things that the Commission has tried is to provide a more, or I would say, a proper level playing field, even though this is not yet there, but we think that this has not been ambitious enough. Then if we look at the consolidated tape, very heated debate, very much, I can say. I mean, all the different parts of the sector, the banks, the buy side, exchanges, we all have something to say here. But well, let's try to just calm down in terms of emotions. What's the problem with the consolidated tape in Europe? Why we don't have one, so to say? And it is because of lack of quality data. If you don't have good data to consolidate and to put together, it's not possible to put this kind of common language. And this is the reason why Europe doesn't have yet a consolidated tape. I think this is something more or less we all agree on. Then, of course, the forms, the futures, the details on the consolidated tape, this is where, a lot is at stake. There we are quite disappointed, I must say, with the proposal from the Commission. But why? Because we think it's a very complex project. We think that it may have a huge impact on exchanges, and in particular on smaller exchanges. And we are a little bit worried because we should not forget that the role of an exchange is twofold. On one hand is to bring companies into the markets, the listing function, and on the other hand is the trading function with price formation. So in there, probably a lot will be debated now in the co-legislation. And then the third one, briefly, is the competitiveness. In there, we are satisfied because the Commission, following also the the opinion of the UK, decided to exempt exchange-traded derivatives from the so-called open access of clearing. And definitely, we completely agree with that. We are very grateful and satisfied that the Commission has decided also to follow that kind of trend at worldwide and allow derivatives markets to continue innovation. So just to conclude, Patrick, I took a bit of time, but it's to say that when you go a little bit into the details, of course, there is a bit of one step forward, one step back.
I think that's really, really useful and very, very easy for everyone to understand exactly what is good and bad. And I mean, it's also fascinating because you talk about the consolidated tape, and I see we've got a great question, with 2 great questions actually, which we're going to come to in a moment. But when we're looking at the consolidated tape, it's quite fascinating because in fact, only a month or so ago, I mean, FESE, you made a proposal, which was actually a very modest proposal for a consolidated tape. And I must admit, I was quite shocked because it was rebuffed within 24 hours by the European Commission, which is pretty much low latency in the world of Brussels rebuttals, I would have thought. And it was quite shocking because you were actually trying to do something that was practical. and therefore it surprised me, because suddenly they've come out with the all singing, all dancing, holistic sip on steroids, to use an American metaphor, which seems very difficult to actually build.
Yeah, no, indeed. It is true that you are very right. They were really fast in reacting. So maybe for those that are watching us right now, just to say that indeed FESE decided, as I said, it is a very heated debate. So we commissioned a study to an independent consultancy, Oliver Wyman, who did a cost-benefit analysis of the consolidated tape. And what it was being looked at was one of the key areas of these futures I mentioned, and is the delay of the tape. It is not the same to have a tape that is close to real time, as the Commission wishes to do, and in fact has proposed, or a slightly delayed tape. Because of course, one thing that has been agreed is that the tape is not for trading, and definitely not in the European Union, due to the different trade data centers that we have from Helsinki to Greece. Okay, so we are very much diverse towards the geography. So what this study concluded is that from a cost-benefit analysis, probably the most sensible approach will be the 15-minute delay tape. And why this is so important for exchanges, it is because exchanges, of course, they also run market data businesses. And this is something that we do also in the form of disseminating the prices when we do the price formation. So this is what I explained earlier. And this market data business that accounts in some exchanges into a quite significant percentage of the total revenues is even more relevant in those smaller markets, because we should not forget that Europe is very diverse. I mean, you know, we have the East, we have the West, but also we have different exchange groups that operate across, and they are all different. So we need to see that those smaller exchanges that are in growing markets, that are really at the backbone of the financial ecosystem, of course, will have a lot to lose and a lot at stake if this consolidated tape is too intrusive and it is really affecting too much their market data business. So that means that if they have to lose a relevant percentage of their total revenues, that will mean that maybe they will have to kind of reconsider what is the function when it comes to bringing companies into the markets. So I think that we really wanted to put a sensible approach, also from an infrastructure point of view, something easy to implement. But as you rightly said, Patrick, in less than 24 hours, also we were very timely because we had a public webinar with the European Commission. The Director General of FISMA already said that for them, 15 minutes was not ambitious enough. They wanted to go shorten in terms of delay. And in fact, as we have seen in the adopted package, they have proposed as technically possible close to real time.
Interesting. Well, speaking of being as technically possible close to real-time consolidated tapes, we have a little one here, ladies and gentlemen. It's running alongside the picture you're watching us on at the moment, and therefore you can see our questions coming in real time. We're speaking to Rosa Armesto, the Deputy Director General of FESE, the Federation of European Securities Exchanges, from Brussels with love. If you've got a question, drop it into our consolidated tape, whether you're watching us this evening on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. Here's a question from, I do believe, Women on It. Good evening, Rosa. Great to see power. Hashtag Women on It, hacking the future. How much of the CMU package or the MIFIR review do you think we can logically see passing?
Thank you for the question. It's a good question. I mean, probably it's too early to say, of course. We will have to see how co-legislators position themselves. But I think it's not going to be an easy walk for the Commission. And why? It is because some of the proposals are taking some of the power at member state level. And when I say power, I say more the sovereignty that, for instance, you have in certain countries with regards to capital markets. So one of the things that we did at FESE was a campaign in, I think it was around September, October, just raising awareness of what will mean a close to real-time tape for smaller exchanges. So we got a coalition of 13 exchanges. So you can see going from Tallinn down to Greece, including Malta, Zagreb, etc. We have them all just saying in a letter to the commissioner, but also to their authorities at member state level and European Parliament members from their constituencies, explaining the impact that this project will have in the real economy as a business. And this is something that we really had loads of, I would say, ears. I will also say, I mean, I don't want to sound, exaggerating, but in my humble opinion, I really think that this campaign had a great effect, because if you look very carefully at the Commission proposal, there is now a reference to small exchanges, and they say that they will have to be compensated in a kind of special way because of the revenue loss that they will be facing with this consolidated tape. So I really wonder then how much of this will pass, because I really think that smaller member states will stand up for their exchanges, also because in these ecosystems are much less diversified. So normally the capitals are quite worried about the well-functioning of the markets, and we need to see. Then regarding the other measures, of course, as I say, too early to say. At the European Parliament will also be interesting. We still do not know who will be the appointed rapporteur and shadows, but I also think that the different political parties will take a stand. I can say that from what I have been seeing in the press, the members of European Parliament that have been interviewed, nobody really embraced fully the proposal. So that means that probably they have an opinion, and we'll have to see with them what can we do to improve the text.
Very interesting. So lots to play for on the process of the review. There's going to be a great deal of adventure taking place in the near future. I'm here with Rosa Armesto. We're talking about, well, we're coming from Brussels with love this evening. I'm in Valletta. Rosa is in Brussels, where she's the Deputy Director General of FESE. Thank you very much, Woman on It, for that excellent question. Really good. Also, ladies and gentlemen, when you're thinking about morning reading, of course, Exchange Invest, the daily newsletter of the Bourse Business, please sign up now and subscribe. At the same time, if you're looking for a great show tomorrow, midday Eastern, 6 p.m. Central European time, we're going to have the ladies of Arawak Exchange are going to be on Positively Hack Delivered, presented by Woman on It's Beata Young. That show promises to be lit, and it's coming to you on the same networks, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube via the Woman on It, One It network. So returning to Brussels, we have a very interesting question from Christopher Messina. What about innovative models which avoid punitive market fade by sharing interest levels in illiquid securities, thereby permitting market participants to explore for liquidity without having to show their hands pre-trade? Good grief, I think there's a PhD in that question, actually. It's very interesting, Christopher. So you're talking about the aggregation of possibly different orders in illiquid securities across markets, and what generally might that do for the European Union? Because, of course, it would cut across a multiplicity of different regulations.
Well, one thing I need to say before answering the question is that always innovation goes before legislation, okay? So now I can tell you that in Brussels we will be discussing and really trying to come to terms with what we think is the best to put on paper, but the reality is that indeed businesses go much faster. But okay, if we put that on the side, it is true that one of the things that are very important in a well-functioning equity market structure is the level playing field. And I think this is something that we have not enjoyed for the past years. And why? It's because precisely talking about not showing their hands in the pre-trade. This is what we call also in the jargon, the dark trading. And in fact, this is something that while it is useful and necessary to be waived, to be exempted of showing your intentions on pre-trade at a certain point, this is only, I will say, advisable for certain types of trades. So when this comes into large blocks, for instance, that will have market impact, of course, they need to be waived from pre-trade transparency. I must say I was not fully aware of this innovative model, but it needs to be seen whether it really qualifies to be exempted for the pre-trade transparency, because if not, then the most advisable for a well-functioning and efficient capital market is that this liquidity is shifted into price formation, because as I said earlier, price formation really is at the core of everything. This is precisely the thing that should be guiding for the interest of issuers and investors.
Certainly, if you look back at what the European Union has achieved, and I think one great act that worked very, very well was the original MiFID, which actually revolutionized the exchange's business. Now, that rather predates your career with FESE, but nonetheless, it's interesting because I'm not sure that the exchanges as a whole necessarily welcomed the idea of MiFID before it came in. But ultimately, MiFID has actually been a great boon for the exchange business, has it not?
No, it has. I must say, I wouldn't say that the exchanges didn't welcome. No, I think MiFID came in the wave of competition, right? I mean, this is something that it came in other different sectors, in energy, in airlines. It also came into market infrastructure. So, of course, competition has put some trading cost down, has created choice for investors, and all this is good. What has happened, in my view, is that this has gone a little bit too big, okay? I mean, if you look at the numbers that are provided by ESMA, who is the European supervisor, you see that we have hundreds of trading venues in total in Europe. And this has fragmented a lot the liquidity. And not only has fragmented, but it's very difficult to navigate, and also in this absence of consolidated view, because not everybody reports in the same way. So I think we have a problem of, on one hand, fragmentation of liquidity, but also, on the other hand, in our opinion, we have a problem of level playing field, because we really think that let's say the mantra that should be followed is same business, same rules. So those type of trades that should qualify to go into a multilateral trading platform should not be then executed in a bilateral trading platform, basically.
Very interesting. Very, very opposite point. Same business, same rules. And also it's intriguing. You're talking about the plethora of venues, but that then brings us back, of course, to trade reporting, which leads us to what seems to be the topic throughout the course of this evening, in some ways threading through, which is the consolidated tape. How do you get all this data onto the consolidated tape when some venues have significant delays in how they're allowed to report?
That's an excellent question, Patrick. Indeed, the deferrals are, and this is why precisely, no? Because of the deferrals, we were saying, why do you want to push a close to real-time tape, no? I think it makes much more sense and will be less intrusive to have a little bit delayed consolidated view. But well, I think the key task, and this is not going to be easy, is going to be for ESMA to first help defining the standards, because we need to first agree on the language. Apparently, the Commission has said that this will be done also with the advice of a stakeholder group. My God, I don't know how this group will be, because as I said, it's a very heated debate. But anyhow, it's going to be the Commission and ESMA together setting up these data standards, making everybody report on the same way, so to say. So something that can then be used by those companies that will stand up to offer the consolidated tape. So I think we still have steps to kind of go through before we see this consolidated tape live in our screens, and we just can click and get the effect of that. But it is true that, I mean, with the work on data standards, even though I need to say that even years ago, when I started working in FESE, one of the things that we did collectively was the market model typology. So it was a very technical thing, the so-called MMT, but precisely was an industry-led, on voluntary basis initiative that already was a good attempt to try to fix this kind of lack of common language when it comes to trade flags. So, well, let's see. I mean, as I said, the consolidated tape has loads of challenges, and this is why we were a little bit puzzled that the Commission wanted to go so sophisticated from the start, because we really think that there are still many, many things to kind of tick before we can get into a certain sort of delay, etc.
Yes, very interesting. And you mentioned the data standardization working group. I think its rules of reference will presumably be 15 rounds of 3 minutes each, with the Marquess of Queensberry rules applying throughout. Who will be the official champion? It will be a very, very interesting and I think heated debate from start to finish. Thank you very much, Christopher Messina. You've made a comment to your question. Thanks for the comments, Rosa Armesto. The headache for innovators, of course, remains that no matter how brilliant a tool and no matter how many sophisticated investors want to use it, they still all need to ask permission to act in their own commercial interest. Well, there's a wry philosophical comment for you, which hopefully can be tattooed on the forehead of somebody at the European Commission in due course to see if they'll take it up. Certainly the pre-trade, post-trade liquidity issue is something that's very, very important, as are the data issues and so on. What else is going on at the moment in Europe that we should be aware of, or that is likely to be coming down the pipes in the near future, Rosa?
Well, there is also now coming, with regards to capital markets, the listing review, and this is something that now is being consulted publicly. So anyone that is interested, I think the consultation opens until February. And from there, the Commission really tries to come up with what needs to be addressed or changed from a legislation point of view. But okay, if we now go a little bit beyond what it is, the functioning of the markets, I mean, we also need to be awake about the probably very soon approved digital package. This has different also legislations, MiCA, DORA, and the DLT pilot regime. So these are the three, at least, that for us have been really relevant. So one is looking at the crypto assets, the other one is looking at the cloud and cyber, and the other one is looking at blockchain. And this is also very interesting to observe, because obviously we are in a digital transition. And again, here the Commission is really trying in a smart way, together with the co-legislators, to try to legislate something that is already, going really fast. And then we also have a very important pillar, that this is a huge one, which is the sustainable finance and everything that has to do with the sustainability transition. And again, there is a lot that is going on about the ESG, the taxonomy, and we are also looking at that from an exchanges perspective. So I will say that these three themes, so capital markets or capital markets union, let's call it, with all the different measures, digital and sustainability, is something that, President von der Leyen really wanted to have as a priority for our sector, and indeed they are delivering on that.
Very interesting. It's going to be a very, very interesting package indeed. And we'll also look forward to seeing who are going to be the rapporteurs to be appointed on various different things, because I know they're still bereft of rapporteurs at the moment. Now, therefore, the job of FESE, I mean, you're very, very focused. You operate from Brussels. You are essentially the inner workings in Brussels for the exchange industry across Europe and beyond. How does that mesh with the other industry bodies in the world of exchanges?
Well, I must say that each of us, the ones that we are playing, we do have our targets and our objectives. So, I mean, if it comes to my mind, that we have somehow kind of a sister organization, which is called the WFE, World Federation of Exchanges, which, shares most of the membership with FESE. Sorry, or I would say the other way around, because FESE is smaller, so FESE shares most of the membership with the WFE. But again, the goals are different. Why? Because FESE exists to really speak about the European issues. So our really kind of DNA is really to be the interlocutors on anything that happens at European level with regards to legislation. Our colleagues in the WFE, of course, they look at many more themes, I will say, at least from a worldwide perspective. And for instance, when it comes to supervision, well, for us is ESMA, our interlocutor, for them is IOSCO. So I do think that in the end, we all promote the value proposition of exchanges, which sometimes is not well understood. I mean, because, even we talk a lot to politicians, no? And people that are a little bit far from our business realities. And while banking or even asset management is kind of known or understood quite rapidly, the real functioning of an exchange and the purpose of an exchange sometimes it's a little bit misunderstood. So I think that anything that has to do with the promotion and value proposition, which I think both associations we do, is of course very welcome.
And one of the things I would applaud you for at FESE is I know you run a lot of courses trying to bring a better level of understanding, let's put it that way, to the people who actually work within Brussels, and therefore help them understand better how exchanges are working, which I think is really, really vital outreach, because everybody thinks they know how exchanges work, but not necessarily many people really do totally understand just how pivotal the exchange model is to the economy, and indeed how the exchange model is the epicenter of modern electronic commerce. I'm here with Rosa Armesto. We're into the last 20 minutes of the show, ladies and gentlemen, from Brussels with love. Rosa is the Deputy Director General of FESE, the Federation of European Securities Exchanges. She's joining us this evening from the heart of the European community's bureaucracy in Brussels. She represents the world of exchanges to the European Union and the European Commission and its various other entities. If you're interested in asking a question, now's the time. Ping us a message down the side of the sidebar of whatever way you're watching this particular show, whether you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. And can I also ask, we're saying this is from Brussels with love, but actually we would really appreciate a little bit of love ourselves, ladies and gentlemen. If you get a chance, send us a like, ping us on the appropriate template in front of you, whichever place you're watching this show. It helps get us up the ratings, and therefore more people can understand the exchange message. Rosa, we talked a little bit earlier about the whole concept of primary markets. We've got away, we've been talking a lot about the secondary market environment, but I think there's a huge conversation about primary markets. You hit on it earlier. The European Union is simply, one could argue the whole world is not listing enough stocks, even though this has been a record year for the industry. How do you see the European Union, the European Commission being able to help push that forward?
Well, I must say that they are thinking hard to really try to address this problem, because indeed it's a bit dramatic, so to say, no? For instance, just to give an example, but the Spotify example is one of the kind of illustrations that is very much used in some of the roundtables I have been attending in the past months. Because, of course, everybody regrets that having such a successful startup company, then in the end gets listed in the US. So they are really trying hard. And as I said, also with this listing consultation right now, but also in the Capital Markets Union, to look at how to make companies access in a easier way. But we have a reality in the European Union, which is the 27 member states. So I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm just saying it is a reality. Why is this? Because in Europe, you have still 27 accountancy laws, 27 insolvency laws, you have taxation, etc. So what happens as well is that there are lots of obstacles and barriers for these companies really to have an easy access to the liquidity and to obviously benefit from capital markets. So while the European Commission is really trying to think what they can alleviate in terms of making listing less complicated, even less costly in terms of requirements. For instance, now in this CMU package, they have proposed what is called the single access point. In acronyms, it's called the ESAP. And this is something intended to show all the companies in one central point, so all the listed companies, so that brokers and investors have an easier way to get information about them. But even though the Commission is trying things here and there, it is very important that there is a commitment as well from the member states, or from the Council, but also from the European Parliament to really steer and push this Capital Markets Union. So I think only bringing the three actors at European level together, we will really be able to try to give this push that is needed to try to improve the primary market, so that companies get financing from capital. Because, for instance, this afternoon, we had a webinar discussing about pensions and how capital markets can help on that. And one of the panelists who, by the way, belonged to the French government. He said, look, Europe has lots of capital, meaning that, we have, all the citizens, the rate of savings is high. Why this capital is not channeled into the capital markets. And again, even though there we are not talking about primary, but also there we're talking about the same sort of obstacles that we have due to the infrastructure that we have in the European Union.
Very interesting questions of infrastructure. And actually, Rosa, that leads us very elegantly into another question. So since countries do have different legislative cultures, different approaches to compliance, which country, and I'm going to open this up a bit, which country, or possibly even outside Europe, which region do you see as the most innovation fintech friendly?
Well, if we talk about outside the European Union, I think it's clearly the US, right? But if we look at Europe, I think it's not about, I wouldn't use the word friendly here, okay? Because in principle, I mean, the legislation that applies, I mean, in most cases at European level is the same for everybody, right? When it comes to these directives that we are talking, or the pieces of legislation I just mentioned, MiFID, the digital package with MiCA, DORA, etc., are at European level. What I see is that we do have some sort of idiosyncrasy in certain countries, or call it also linked to financial literacy as well. So I think it's a sort of function of the society that are more open to innovation and to fintech. I can give you an example that also links with the exchange, which is the NASDAQ. So NASDAQ in Europe, as you know, runs the Nordic countries and the Baltic countries. And for instance, Sweden is one of the, I will say, most innovative fintech kind of, if I call it friendly, in the sense that, you have companies there, but you also have an exchange that is quite innovative in that sense. And at the same time, it is a society that it is very much into the capital market. So for instance, I have always been told that it's very common to see not younger people, but older people, that are really investing through the phones. So it all puts together that, yes, there are some cultures that are a little bit more ahead of the wave, but this could also be other countries, as for instance, Germany also has the take, France, etc. So I really think it does not depend on the country itself, but yes, there are different components that kind of put this all together as a result.
So a fascinating mix, a cornucopia, and in fact a unicornucopia, because we've got Ian's comment, go Tallinn, Estonia with the most unicorns per capita in Europe. So underlining again part of the comment you're making about actually the Baltic states and the Nordic states through NASDAQ Nordic, and there are many innovations there. And of course, there are a number of SME markets and other capital raisers who are out trying to push innovation across the market. So thank you very much for the question there, Beata Young. And once again, we're looking forward to being lit with the ladies of Arawak X tomorrow evening on Positivity Hacks Delivered. Alex Maturi, number 006 in IPO-VID parlance, a former chief executive of S&P Global Indexes. Great to see you, Alex. He's wondering, what's the likely timeline for the completion of some of these very exciting European Union initiatives, Rosa?
Well, timeline really depends, and depends on how fast the negotiations go. So now the Commission, for instance, if I take the example of the MiFID review on the consolidated tape, is a very good example. The Commission has done its job first. So they have put the proposal. Now co-legislators need to independently look at it and form opinion. Once they have formed opinion, they come the three together when it's called the trialogues. And then once this is agreed, we can say that the piece of legislation has been completed at a political level. So if we look at that, well, I would say in the most optimistic scenarios, let's say that MiFID gets agreed at political level in the course of 2022. If then ESMA, because not before it cannot happen, so they need to wait until it's agreed at political level for then go into what is called the technical level. So it will be all the work that ESMA needs to develop. And for instance, on the consolidated tape, many of the futures have been tasked to ESMA. So then ESMA needs to do its work. How long it's going to take? Maybe it takes 2-3 years. And it will only then be when, for instance, we could see this consolidated tape live. So it's going to take time. I mean, there are some optimistic voices that say that they would like to have this consolidated tape up and running before this current commission exhausts its time, which will be towards the end of 23. I have my doubts that it will be like that. So, but let's see.
I must admit, I hope I'm not sounding too cynical, but I am absolutely happy to buy anybody who's reckoning that you're going to see a consolidated tape by the end of 2023. I sincerely hope it happens. We really want to see it happen, and we want to see it happen that's in a way that's fair to all, that is good for the SME exchanges, that encourages things. But the idea that something's going to happen in Brussels in essentially 24 months from now, I don't think you're going to manage to get there, just simply because of the amount of effort that has to go through the procurement process and so on. I can't see that happening. But it's exciting that some of the legislation may actually not be that far down the road as we think, because I think sometimes everybody sort of looks at, oh, EU proposal, it's going to be 5 to 7 years before we actually see it happening. Whereas you're saying that a lot of this stuff, because they're reviews, could be happening much sooner.
Well, it depends, Patrick. I mean, is this true that some things go faster, but also those things that have an easy implementation? I mean, we have seen what is called quick fix. So there are very kind of targeted changes that indeed they can really be implemented in 1 of 2 years. I must say this consolidated tape timeline, I said, in the most optimistic scenario, okay? It could well be that it's going to be like about 5 years until we see this happening. So it really depends also on the complexity. But again, the more difficult and cumbersome and complex we make this project, obviously the longer it's going to take to be agreed first, but second, to be executed. So let's see. I mean, I don't definitely, if you ask me personally, I don't think this is going to be real very soon. I completely agree with you on this 2023. I don't think it's realistic, but let's see. At the same time, then, another thing to take into account is that why it is so important to really make the most of this moment. For instance, in the press release that we issued last week, in reaction to the proposal, we call it also a missed opportunity. It is because the next time there will be an opportunity to review market structure, that will be in some years' time. So anything that we see it is not working, so again, going back to the transparency, we really think that the levels of transparency are not at all enough for a well-functioning capital markets. If we don't fix them now, and when I say now is in the next year, then the next opportunity that legislation will open to do so will be probably in so-called MiFID 3. And then we will have to wait until then with all the consequences that this ill-designed current market structure is having in our companies and our investor landscape. So that's why it is very important that when the door opens, meaning that now we are reviewing MiFIR, that we really try to make the most of it with a vision for Europe and for its citizens and its companies.
Very interesting. So I'm going to come to Simon Huckle's question in a moment. But first of all, actually, Chris Messina, he's got a sort of follow-up, which is in this consolidated tape landscape. Has the institutional understanding evolved in respect to what precise uses a consolidated tape will be put to?
Well, my answer is going to be very quick. No. There is no understanding. And why? It is because there is no use case. So as it sounds, there is no use case in this consolidated tape proposal. So yes, there is mandatory contribution to the tape, which is something that we very much welcome, but there is no use case, meaning that there is nothing linked to best execution verification, as for instance happens in the US, or even compulsory acquisition of the tape. No, it's on voluntary basis. So I really think that because of the list, the wish list of this tape and what this tape will achieve, and also trying to mirror the US and getting people coming together and kind of getting very excited about that, I don't really think that they have really thought through all the different unintended consequences that this may have. And for instance, the Commission has done some estimations on the use of the consolidated tape with regards to the revenues that it will generate. But this is done on sort of voluntary basis because there is no use case. And this is something that we have been echoing all the time. We have been saying there must be a use case link into this project. Otherwise, the results are unknown, in our opinion.
Well, indeed, bravo, says Chris Messina. Clarity from a regulatory official. How delightful. Thank you for your honesty. I think fight fair there, Chris. Now, come on. Rosa is representing an industry organization. She's not a regulatory official, to be clear. That would be representing the European Union itself. But I agree, the clarity of the answer is brilliant because it really helps us to understand better. Thank you, Alex Maturi, as well, for the question that got us into that little cycle discussing the interesting vagaries of when these things might happen. We're probably, due to tape lag, only going to be able to take one more question on our consolidated tape this evening. I want to go to Simon Huckle. Simon, hello again. Good evening. Thank you very much for watching so avidly. Rosa, you said crypto and blockchain, and I got very excited. We know regulation is key. How do you feel Brussels views digital assets? And do you think Europe will get left behind the rest of the world as we embrace the brave new digital crypto revolution?
Yeah, well, I think that Brussels is really taking quite seriously the digital transition, and they are trying not to be too prescriptive when it comes to this type of assets, because they, of course, are fully aware that they are moving really fast and that we really need to kind of be a little bit accommodative of what the changes will be. At the same time, I think that it is very important to keep in mind that whatever happens with crypto in the future, and let's see where this is going to take us, it's very important that it takes us to a much more democratic system, no? In the sense that many more people can really be part of capital markets and many more people can really benefit from that. So I think it very much links to the kind of technology as well from capital markets itself and how this is embraced there. It is true that there are other jurisdictions that are a little bit more advanced into this, but I am quite confident that I think that regulation does not try to kill things before they kind of give the success of their potential.
Wonderful words indeed. The possibility that regulatory throttling may be an issue going forward, and that's something we certainly want to avoid. And it's good to hear that FESE wants to avoid as well. And of course, you represent exchanges who have moved into the digital asset space, such as the Swiss exchanges, amongst others, in your membership, Rosa. And it's very, very fascinating. So thinking about where we are, innovation, thank you, Simon Huckle, for your question, the whole future of markets thing. Years ago, some bloke, I can't remember his name, wrote a book called Capital Market Revolution. What do you think? Where does this capital market revolution thing go next, Rosa?
Well, I think technology is key. I mean, as you said, some of my members are very much into these crypto assets and new innovations. So I think technology is going to be the revolution. It is the revolution, and it's going to be kind of the landmark of these capital markets. But I think, that capital markets, hopefully through this technology, will become more open. And open, I will use the word of democratic, meaning that are more accessible to everyone, are transparent, are efficient for all, and not just for a few. I think this is something that will be a key milestone if we use this technology in general, to really make it for everybody. We need to empower people. I think we are in a moment precisely also with the situation of the pandemic and the health crisis that we are living in, that we need capital markets that are fairer and more accessible to everyone. And I really hope that this can be also achieved through technology and digitalization.
Deploying technology, digitalization, liquidity, accessibility, transparency, openness to all. Thank you very much for the question, Simon Huckle. Thank you also, Peter Sekon, saying as always, it's great to see this show and an interesting listen as always. I'm delighted this has been the highlight of the week. I have to say it's been the highlight of my week, being able to have Rosa Armesto as our guest on this show. Certainly what we've been doing, bringing you from Brussels with love this evening, is some interesting insights on what's going on in relation to the MiFID review, Capital Markets Union, the possibility or perhaps the delay in producing a tape for the consolidated prices of stocks and bonds across the European Union once somebody comes up with indeed a business case use for it from the European Commission. Many different issues we've been able to cover today with a lot of wonderful insights from Rosa Armesto, the Deputy Director General of FESE. That's the voice of the parish of securities exchanges in Brussels. Thank you very much, Christopher Messina. Yes, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you to everybody who's been presenting today, not just our guest, Rosa Armesto, but also Simon Huckle, Chris Messina, Oliver Hauer, Ian, who was very, very happy and excited about the idea of Unicornicopia, which is Estonia's Tallinn. Women on it, thank you for your questions. Great to hear from you. And we're really looking forward to tomorrow night's PhD. Those ladies are going to be lit from Arawak Exchange in the Bahamas. Alex Maturi, guest 006, it was great to see you again. Thank you for your question on executing what's going on. Fabulous to hear as well from Peter Sekon at the end, and once again, Simon Huckle. Next week, we've got a new code for market structure. Low code, no code, let's be flexible. How agile can things get at the back end? We're going to be talking to Tarana Deriati. She's the CEO of Vermiculus Financial Technology. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Patrick L. Young. I want to say thank you very much to, once again, all the stockholders of Valerian Blockchain who've been watching today, as I'm your executive director. Most importantly, catch up with us day to day in Exchange Invest, the daily newsletter. We'll be back next week with IPO-VID. And most importantly of all, thank you very, very much, Rosa Armesto, for being a fantastic guest. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all a great week in life, blockchain, and markets.